This lesson is over algebra representation using tables. So let's look at our how do you know. So what is 5 times negative 4 plus 4 squared? So this is an expression right here, and it's equivalent to negative 4. Well, I know this is an order operation problem. So let me highlight the operator, the addition or subtraction operator. So I see the first term and the second term. Term 1 is on the left side. What is 5 groups of negative 4? Negative 20. On the second term, you see 4 squared. What is 4 squared? Well, 4 squared, the factor is 4, that's the base. You multiply it twice itself. It repeats twice. So 4 times 4 is 16. So negative 16, so negative 20 put together with 16. I have more negatives by 4. So the answer is negative 4. That is correct. So today we're going to be learning something called dependent and independent quantities. You will also see this when you head up onto algebra either in 9th grade or 8th grade. This is the foundation right here. So for each pair, choose the statement that makes sense. Once you figure out which statement makes sense, circle the independent quantity and underline the dependent quantity. So first of all, let's figure out which one makes sense. The amount of money I have determines the type of car I can buy. Let's see, does it make sense? The more money I have, the better car I can buy. I think that makes sense. The type of car I can buy determines the amount of money I have. So if I buy a cheap car that tells you how much money I'm going to make, I don't think that makes sense. X. So the first one makes sense. The amount of water I drink depends on how often I go to the bathroom. The more water I drink, the more often I go to the bathroom. Well, that makes way more sense. The amount of water I drink depends on how often I go to the bathroom. It makes more sense with the more I drink, the more often I go. The number of minutes I play Xbox Live is the result of how many minutes I have purchased. Okay. The minutes I have purchased is the result of the number of minutes I play. The first one makes more sense to me. Because the more minutes I play, if I play a lot of minutes or a little minute, it's because of how many minutes I bought. So that makes more sense. So now that we have gotten that part out of the way, now it's time to determine which one is the dependent and which one is the independent quantity. So in science, I know you have talked about this. The dependent quantity responds. It responds to it. So the amount of money I have determines the type of car I can buy. So which one responds? Let's see. The dependent, I think, is the type of car I can buy depends on the amount of money I have. So that's how I use. When would you use the word depends? So the type of car I have depends on how much money I have. So the dependent is the type of car I can buy. The independent is the amount of money I have. Next one. The more I drink, the more often I go to the bathroom. Which one makes more sense? The more I drink depends on the more often I go to the bathroom, or the more often I go to the bathroom depends on the more water I drink. So the dependent is this one. The more often I go to the bathroom depends on the more water I drink. And the last one, the number of minutes I play Xbox Live is the result of how many minutes I have purchased. So the number of minutes I play Xbox Live depends on how many minutes. So this must be the dependent and this is the independent. Sometimes it is not as written as sentence. Most of the time you're going to see dependent, independent already in a table or a graph. So this is where it gets a little more easier to do. So the question here is, you're given 3 tables and 3 graphs. Label the independent with an I and a dependent with a D. Then label each quantity in a table with the X and Y. First of all, I'm going to label X and Y. This is the X. This is the Y. The first number is the X. The second number is the Y. This is the X. This is the Y. This is the x-axis. Well, it says it right there. And this is the y-axis. This is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. This is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. So, the total cost depends on how many tickets sold. So, which one's the dependent? Or is it the number of tickets sold depends on the total of cost? No, this is the dependent, and this is the independent. The original price depends on a discounted price. No, the discounted price depends on the original price. So the amount of money depends on how many quarters I have. So this is the dependent. This is the independent. Let's see, the weight of frozen yogurt depends on the total price. No. The total price depends on the weight. So this is the dependent, because if you go to the yogurt shop, it depends. The price depends on how much yogurt you buy. Independent. The total price with delivery fee depends on the donut price. Dependent. Independent. The perimeter of a rhombus or shape depends on the length of the side. Dependent. Independent. So the question here is, why do you think the graph of these relationships are only shown in quadrant 1? Well, this is about money. This is about you can't have a negative side length, and you can't have negative donut prices, so that's why it's quadrant 1, because it's positive. And in the algebraic relationship, now this is how I was able to do it. The input, or the x value, is always the independent. So the x value is always the independent, while the output value, or the y axis, is the dependent. So it's right here, y. This is another one. Some of you may need a visual. In science class, in 6th grade science, you see this chart. You are actually given this chart in 6th grade science, I believe. First of all, you have to label the title. Then in the x-axis and the y-axis, you have to label it with more labels. But I know in science, they talk about the dry mix. I'll be honest, I do use this to help myself out. The dependent is the y-axis because the dependent responds, while the independent is the x-axis. That's what is manipulated. That this one changes, and so this one will respond to its change. So the y-axis is always the dependent, the independent is always the x-axis. Dry mix. So let's go back here, see if that really is true. Oh, dry, dy, x, mix. Dry mix, dry mix. And this is dry mix, dry mix, dry mix. So some of you may need to use that. I'll be honest, I sometimes have to use it too, because some of it is a little confusing because it can be both ways depending on which one depends or which one. So we're going to read a story called "The Doorbell Rang." In this story, you have 2 kids, and this is the mother. She is a very generous woman. She allows her children friend to come visit to partake in cookies. So the kids they're about to eat cookies. Then all of a sudden the doorbell rang. Entered 3 kids. And then they looked at their cookies and said, okay, let's share. And such nice people. The next thing they know, the doorbell rang a second time, and entered the house. 5 new kids showed up. Then the doorbell rang again a third time, and entered 7 new kids entered. So they're all sitting around the dinner table, said, oh no, do we have enough cookies for all of us? the next thing you know, the doorbell rang a fourth time and 9 kids. Wait, I'm sorry. This is wrong. This should be 4 kids. This should be 5 kids. Let me say the story one more time. So the first time the doorbell rang, 3 kids enter. The second time the doorbell rang, 4 kids enter. The third time the doorbell rang, 5 kids enter. As they are sitting around a dinner table, wondering if they had enough cookies, the fourth doorbell rang, and what do you think? How many kids enter? 6 kids enter. Then there's like, we give up. Then next thing you know, the fifth doorbell rang and entered how many guests? 7 guests. But luckily, it was Grandma with all her senior citizen friends who baked many, many additional cookies. So can you find the relationship here? Let's see. If I had 1 doorbell ring, 3, 2, 4, 3 is 5, 4 is 6, 5 is 7. Are we adding or multiplying to come up with these numbers? I think it's additive. So what are we adding? And here's, we have 1 doorbell ring. We add 2 to get 3. We have 2 doorbell ring. We add 2 to get 4. We had 3 doorbell ring. To get 5, you add 2, the 3 doorbell rings, you add 2 to it to get 5. You have 4 doorbell ring, you add 2 to it to get 6. So the relationship from I can tell is you add 2 to the number of doorbell rings, which can be represented by the letter X. X is called a variable. A variable is a letter or symbol that really should be a number. So let's see if we can solve this. If there are 10 doorbell rings and the relationship is X plus 2, then 12 guests would have entered. If the doorbell rang 20 bells later, add 2, 22 guests would enter the house. 50 doorbell ring, that means 52 guests would have entered the house. 100 doorbell rings later, that means 102 would have entered. So the question is, graph it. So, 1 doorbell ring, 3 guests enter. Oh, I should label this. This is the rings. And these are the guests. So let's go back here. X-axis, Y-axis. 2 doorbell ring, 4 guests. 3 doorbell ring, 5 guests. 4 doorbell ring, 6 guests. Is it? Let's see. 6, 4, 6. Yeah. 5 is 7. 6 would be 8. 7 would be 9. 8 doorbell ring would be 10. 9 would be 11. So, according to the table, how many guests will enter at the 7th doorbell ring? 7, 9 guests. Number 2, list the independent variable and number 3, list the dependent. Let's see, which one depends on what? We could look at here. Do the rings depend on the guests, or do the number of guests depends on how many rings? Which one is the dependent? So the number of guests who enter depends on how many rings. Yeah, so this must be the dependent, and this must be the independent. So this must be the dependent, and this must be the independent. So the dependent is the guess, while the independent is the rings, the number of rings. So it says, list the independent and quantity. So independent quantities are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I could write that down. Some of the independent quantities are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some of the dependent quantities are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, for some of you who are having a difficult time figuring out which one is the dependent and independent, in science class, through many graphs you have made with your teacher, they use something called dry mix because the dependent responds to the y-axis. So dependent responds, and this one is the manipulated. This one changes. The rings will change, so the guest will respond to that ring, the number of rings. So dependent, independent. So is this a multiplicative or additive? It's additive because we're adding 2 to every ring. What is the relationship? What is the rule relationship between a number x? It's x plus 2. And what we're going to be learning soon is x plus 2. So if you noted number of doorbell rings, you add 2 to it. So an expression has numbers, symbols, and operators grouped together that shows the value of something. Example, 2 times 3 is an expression. Notice that there is no equal sign. Later on, we're going to be learning the difference of an equation. An equation has an equal sign to it. A variable is a symbol for a number that we don't know yet. It is usually written with a letter like x, y, c, b. Like in x plus 2, x is the variable. So let's look at our last question. Complete the table about the student movie tickets. If you buy 1 ticket, 2 tickets, 5 tickets, what will the cost be? According to this, they said the relationship rule is 5 groups of x. What's 5 times 1? $5. So I mean each ticket will cost $5, I believe. If you buy 2 tickets, 5 times 2 is 10. If you buy 5 tickets, 5 times 5 would be 25. So which label best describes the dependent? The cost depends on the number of tickets? Or does the number of tickets depend on the cost? No. The cost is the response. While if you manipulate or change the tickets, the cost will respond to it. So, dependent, independent. Which label describes the independent? The tickets, the number of tickets. So dependent is what responds or it depends on. The cost depends on the number of tickets. As some of you may need to use the science, that's why science and math are hand in hand. The y is dependent, responds to the y-axis. And the manipulated, independent, and x. Dry mix.